Hello there, my name is Nick Beech and I'm here today to talk about strategy, or specifically the strategic planning process. Part of the presentation we will basically test you with the question, do you understand the game you're playing? What we're talking there is, do you understand what element as a strategist of the game your company is in? In other words, what is it selling, what market is it furnishing, and how is it going to get competitive advantage with its capabilities to make the market work for it? The learning outcomes. Two key learning outcomes. Firstly, identify exactly what strategy is. So by the end of this, you'll have a good understanding of what the core elements of a good strategic plan is and the good way of making strategy is. And understand the identification of the structure of strategic development. In other words, the stages within the planning process. So at the end of it, we have something that gives result. So we go from the great vision to the implementation. But what is strategy? Well, many people have debated it. Really, it relates to your personal position or your company's personal position in the marketplace. Many companies fall into the trap of missing out what's happened in time. For example, there are many companies, particularly in the UK, that have not evolved with history. In other words, what they were 20, 30 years ago, they've stayed in the mental model of what they were, and haven't evolved into understanding that the market's changed and therefore they have to be a very different animal to be able to compete. Usually those type of companies either erode or go very near to bankruptcy and get bought out, and then to change with another group of leaders who can actually say, well, actually, this is what we're all about. It also depends very much through in the hierarchy of the organisation. A director's perspective of strategy will be very different from a manager's perspective. Each will have their own strategy fitting in an overarching strategy, but they have to know what is their element and what are the key facets of those strategies are. In fact, it really relates to three things. How, the value, and the risk. How we're going to do it, what is the unique value in the mind of the customer that we're going to give, and what are the risks of providing that, considering the resources and the capabilities within our organisation. Often organisations fail because they see the potential, but they do not see the risk of being lured into a market that they cannot fully service. To do that, organisations really have to understand take a holistic perspective of what they're trying to deal with. And they have to be able to mobilise not only what they want to do, but also what the workforce are going to achieve. So effectively what it is not just me as the leader taking the organisation forward, but seeing that I can actually move all my people to do the same thing. So it's very much a driving of the organisation's capabilities, so there is an ultimate collective achievement. Johnson and Scholes basically gave a basic definition of strategy. The key areas of this is direction, scope, and long term. In other words, you have a direction to go in, you know the markets that you need to achieve or need to penetrate to be able to get towards that direction. And you have sustainability in the long term. Those are the three major areas. In addition to that, there are issues like how are you going to get competitive advantage over your competitors, and understand your resource base that you need to balance that advantage off. Other factors that also need to be considered are stakeholders, because you're not just dealing with the ultimate customer, but it's an entire value chain process that you have to go through to be able to enable you to facilitate the intervention with the customer. Therefore, strategy includes direction, where you're going, the scope, which markets do we go in, and specifically which markets we do not go in. How we're going to get competitive advantage, in other words, what is our unique feature in relation to our competition. There was a very good case of Sony. Sony tried to enter the UK security camera market, but he actually went in with a camera that was too good for the market. It was above the specification required, and they were charging a price premium for that specification. They had to realign their entire value chain, not only to reduce cost, but also reduce the specification of the item that they were producing so that they could re-enter the market and penetrate it in a meaningful way. So you may not actually just be looking at adding value. You may have to go into a situation where less is actually more. So your resource base is very important. In addition to that, you should also be aware of the need to understand the relationships within those networks. It is not just bringing your workforce on through the organisation so that you are all fighting in the right direction, but it is also using both your close and extended value chain. So looking a little bit more detailed into strategy, we can see that there's more to it than just making big visions. It's got to have some practicality in how you're looking at the organisation and how things work within the organisation. An interesting tool is the 7S framework, a McKinsey's model, that identified basically the hard structures of strategies, but also the soft side, the skills and styles and the way things were done by the people within the organisation. It's very easy to actually manufacture a hard structure and make a big plan that's all elaborate and has a reams of communications and subsidiary strategies within it. The trick is to be able to sell that strategy to the people within the organisation. Look at the relationships that work well and actually get them to work for you. So there's a need to understand not just the hard side, the structures and plans, but also understand the soft side, dealing with the relationships that's going to facilitate and enable you to achieve what you've got. Often when you are trying to create value in an organisation, particularly in context to the customer's mind, the value could be purely perception, a perceived value of the customer, and it often can be fundamentally affected by the relationships both in the value chain and at the interface between your organisation and its customers stroke consumers. Therefore, you've got to take into consideration those relationships at work, but also the environment that they're operating in. In other words, you cannot assume that the resources that will work in one country will be sufficient to work in another country, because there will be very different environmental contexts. And finally, in that particular area is stakeholders. Stakeholders is often a word that's flippantly used, but it's very important to understand that people will feel that they have some connection to your organisation. If your organisation has made promises to support broader communities, and then you stop doing that, or you don't do it to the degree that they believe that it was going to be, you could have a lot of problems. And there's a number of companies, particularly on global operations, had serious conflicts with regards to indigenous people and also general suppliers. So it's a vast network that you have to see and have an overarching strategy, which matters both a push and pull strategy within it. Critical things: analysis, choice, and implementation. It's key to be able to do effective analysis. In other words, you get a broad picture of the environment, you can see the crucial issues that are affecting the supply chain that you are working within, understand the people you are dealing with, understand the market you're dealing with, and understand the resources you have at your disposal. With that in mind, you can then start to get some understanding of what you've actually got. From that, you've got a critical analysis of your capability. At that point, you can then look at scenarios and make strategic choices and informed choices on the directions you need to go. After that, it's just merely implementation. However, implementation itself is a major area of the operation. At this point, we're looking really at the strategic planning process. Analyse, make your choice, and pass it down the value, your command chain, so that you can get your people to work for you. Critical in that success is good and strong communications, clear indication of the message of what you're trying to achieve in engaging with the market, but also engaging with the people so that they can engage with the market. In summary, strategy is relatively simple. It's so simple, lots of people make mistakes. They often make it far too complex. Maybe not at boardroom level, it can be quite straightforward because you have a holistic perspective of the entire organisation. But when they start to feed it down, they don't filter it and they don't give clarity to those people who are working within their strategy. In other words, they understand at the top what the strategy is, but they haven't bothered to explain it in detail how it affects each individual or collective groups of individuals within their organisations to achieve that aim. In other words, the organisation is so complicated, the boardroom just do not see it. So therefore, within it, there may well be multiple levels of strategy. So the boardroom strategy informs the executive strategy, which informs your middle management strategy, which informs your operations strategy. So there is a cascade of communications needed that both give an informed plan downwards and also enable the company to get an understanding of achievements as they're going up. From that, you can start to look at what's going to generate your competitive advantage. So that advantage is a message that goes through the organisation, and we can actually, through good and effective feedback, identify if we're actually achieving where we're going. Obviously, strategies also have to have a certain degree of flexibility. We can have a great plan, but there's always a need to be able to continually monitor what's going on in the ground, to be able to adapt the plan to accommodate unforeseen changes in the environment.